Welcome to Faith Over Breakfast. You are listening to a podcast by Pastor Eric Siepen and Pastor Andy Littleton. If you enjoy Faith Over Breakfast, we encourage you to rate it on the Apple Podcast app, on Spotify, or Google Play. Thank you and enjoy the podcast. Welcome to Faith Over Breakfast. My name is Eric Siepen, and I am pastor of the Village Church. And across from me is Andy Littleton, pastor of Mission Church and entrepreneur extraordinaire.
Oh, wow.
No. And denominational guru.
The denominational man, the entrepreneur. And then Eric, the critic.
The critic.
The critiquer of bivocationalism and denominations.
Yeah, we tried to be controversial. And we talked about giving and...
I would say this conversation ends up being about money, giving, and the ways that leadership structure could work in the church.
Yep.
Something like that. And actually, I think that this should be of deep interest to anyone in our communities, and that if you're not in our community, this is going to be the best podcast you've ever heard in your entire life.
There you go.
There you go. So don't miss out. Really quick, we say this every once in a while, but I do just want to note that here's the concept of Faith Over Breakfast. Eric and I used to get breakfast before a radio show that we were on, and we always had to really
something culture. I don't
Talking
know.
Culture.
Talking Culture. That's right.
And we had to synthesize down something into maybe 5 minutes worth of radio content, and we always felt like that didn't go that well. We weren't really able to work things out, and we liked the breakfast conversation we had prior as we processed it.
Yeah.
So then this podcast is the breakfast conversation. We do not rehearse. We do not compare notes. We just have a conversation as two pastors. You need to understand that, because often we will say a thing that we will go, that wasn't perfect. That wasn't exactly right. It doesn't necessarily reflect the views or statements of our church or even ourselves. This is us at a breakfast table conversation letting you sit in. So take it as such.
Yes.
And enjoy. Check. 1, 2.
Yep.
Yeah, what do you think? Well, so you wanted to rant on life.
I always want to rant on life, Andy. It's just my way of being.
That was the quote just before we started.
Oh, my goodness. Okay. I mean, you might need to get a snapshot of that. Somebody's been in my office. They've got the soldiers and the Neos hanging there. Interesting. I'm going to have to get a picture of that and put it for Faith Over Breakfast.
I thought it was the kids' Cliff Bars that was your big
there's that too.
Or do you down those on the regular?
I usually have them here for people who, like, on Sundays are like, I need something, and then I just give them a bar. So
wow, I tell those people I'll pray for you.
Oh yeah, well, I found that first you must feed them before you pray for them.
Give them a Cliff Bar. Wow.
Anyway, so we want to talk about something else. We want to talk about money.
Well, I was saying if this were a true Faith Over Breakfast, so when you and I sit down,
it is true. This is very true.
When you sometimes it's because I have a problem. Let's be honest. And so but I think this is supposed to be one of our hangout times that we share with people.
Yeah.
It really kind of is.
It is. It's basically, we said the only way we're going to have a friendship is if it's public.
That's right. And you're 10 years ahead of me or so.
How old are you?
40.
Right. I'm 50. So yes, exactly 10.
Yeah. So I tend to be asking you about things.
Yeah.
Okay. So similar type small church.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you and I have talked about this before, but I need a refresher. So,
oh boy,
talking about money in the church.
Don't like to do it.
No, I don't either. And so here's where my head was at the beginning, and you've pushed back on me on this.
Yeah.
And that was one of the biggest critiques I hear of the church in our setting.
Yeah.
Like central Tucson, Arizona, is that church is just trying to get money for themselves. That's really why they want people to show up. It's kind of just a money grab in the name of religion. And so I had said, we're not going to ask for money in church.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, this Sunday, we asked twice. So
you just were making up for last time.
Yeah. And
How did you end up asking twice? That's interesting to me.
Well, yeah, and so here's my point: is we're doing a thing I wasn't going to do.
You violated your values.
Violated my values again. But the thing is, we're going into the summer.
Yeah.
And we had projected financially for the year. Our giving has come in under that. I think of several reasons why. But that makes it hard. And so we're going into the summer when it's low, and one of our air conditioners in the main room went down. And so we're feeling there's this need. And then I think it's even more complicated because we've got this house that we're working on that really is, the funding for that is not coming from our church's finances.
Right.
But I can see how it would be confusing. So in my mind, I'm looking at this scenario as trying to take on an outsider's gaze, and I'm thinking, so you're fixing up this house, but your own air conditioner doesn't work, and you're asking us for money. Why don't you just use the money from the house? Well, I can't, because it's different buckets that aren't controlled by me. So it's very complex in my mind. So there we are. So we asked, twice, I brought it up basically, where was it? There was a point earlier in the service where I said something, and then John did announcements, and he also reiterated it. And I thought, man, I wasn't going to be the money asking church. We were just going to have the giving station in the back. Our committed people would know about this, do it. Other people wouldn't have to hear about it. But now we felt the need to, within the gathered time, impress upon people it was important.
And what was the response?
Well, I don't know, because I don't know. Actually, we don't. If cash or checks are given, we look at those today. And then online stuff, I do not have access to. And you've pushed back on me on this very much.
Let's push back.
But I have felt like, for me, I will say, it is better that I am not. Maybe that I'm aware of the financial situation, but not every little detail.
So here's where I'm confused about this.
Yeah.
And just work this out for me. I think that you have this position on other areas of people's lives where you just don't want to know. But how is it that you can just have one area where you've decided, I don't want to know about your life, when Jesus talks about money more than anything?
Yeah. Right. And this is exactly what you've pushed back and said, no, it's part of discipleship. You should know what people give. Basically,
right. And people should know the lifestyle with which you live. Mm-hmm. Right. They should see that, so that they know that as they're caring for you, you're not abusing their money.
Sure. Right.
That you are living a life. The other that's humble. The other thing is, I'm not that much of a fan of talking about it on Sunday.
Yeah.
I think it's a personal thing.
Yeah.
I think that as you look at people, so new Christians don't know anything about tithing.
No.
And if you're not preaching on it, or they're not going to know about tithing unless there's a discipleship thing where you're like, hey, this is how you support the church. This is how you think through that.
And so that's one of our factors is a number of our people. There are some new believers, but there's also just, I think, believers who've not really been discipled more formally. Formally is probably not even the word, but in depth. Like they haven't been known in a Christian journey. And we know the data's out there that most of those people don't give to churches.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, the data is
I think we see a lot of those people. And so the people that have giving built in who come to our church as a small sample. And then some of those people that we had that were very stable financial givers in the last year to 2 years moved away.
Yeah.
And that just happened. It wasn't it was got a new job, wanted to live in a different state to work remote, whatever. But things have changed for us.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, in your church major makeup, I'm guessing, is millennials, right? You're
Yep.
mostly millennials, and then there's probably some Gen Xers floating in and out of there, but it's mostly millennials. And the myth about millennials is that they're poor. They're all just about us, same as everybody else. But they're also a little bit more civic oriented. So I think most people just want to know that there's a need and how much the need's going to cost and what they might need to do to help.
This is another interesting thing. So like bringing up the air conditioning.
Yeah.
Or, okay, here's an example. We did our Mexico trip recently, and we offered that people could sponsor other people, and actually that happened. A number of people sponsored other people, and they gave. And so that's good to understand that when there is a specific thing or a project, it seems to bring them out a little bit more. And then, but that regular giving that we've kind of depended on for our daily is maybe the one of the struggles.
Yeah.
But I've been thinking about, I read a book called Work and Worship,
mm-hmm.
and it was talking about in the early church, their view on it, and they had some good research. It was well done. It's actually almost too scholarly for a lot of people, but that mostly what people brought to church to give was the work of their hands in some degree. Like they were a farmer, they brought food. They were a merchant, they brought what they sold.
Right.
And the whole like cash giving or disconnected like card giving online thing is obviously very new. But even the idea of like just it being money
mm-hmm.
is pretty new. And that made me think back too, and I went, is there something messed up in me that's just wanting that like 10% regular gift just because it's dependable? Or should we be talking way more fully orbed, way more like needs based? I mean, what do you do with that kind of stuff?
Well,
it sure is nice when there's just auto payments coming in, man.
Sure. But let me just kind of frame it this way. We live in an individualistic culture, the most individualistic culture in history.
Yeah.
We live in the most consumeristic culture in history, and we live in the most materialistic culture. So my argument would be that you should give sacrificially from each one of those areas.
Okay, say that again. Or explain each one.
So from an individualistic, consumeristic, and materialistic position, money, the green stuff, the digital numbers in your bank account, is the number one thing you do not want to let go of in this culture.
Yeah.
Because it helps you get stuff. And our culture is about getting stuff and creating experiences.
Uh-huh.
So in discipleship, money, I would argue, is the number one thing over having a good theology, even knowledge of the Bible. You have to start with, can you sacrifice and joyfully give? And if you can't joyfully give, then you need to begin to process why. Is it because if I give this amount of money, my child can't eat? Or is it if I give this amount of money, I have to go down on 1 or 2 Amazon purchases?
Yeah.
And what's being addressed in my giving? And I think financially it's just...
Or like not do DoorDash as often, or... I mean,
but
dude, I'm going to say, I'm talking about our people, but including myself, we have the money.
Right.
Yeah.
Lordship.
By and large.
But lordship is a big issue in our culture, is that we believe that we are the Lord, even when we follow Jesus. And so part of discipleship is, no, you're not the Lord in any area. That would include money. For a pastor, I'm going to argue that, I don't think we should be in this constant campaign. Let's build the building. Let's raise the money. Yeah. I mean, I think there's some cultural settings where that's appropriate.
That does feel,
but I do
weird,
think
oddly effective, but weird. Yeah.
You as a pastor when you don't want to talk about it and in disciples about it, what you're saying is, I don't want to mess with your God at all. I don't want to mess with it. That God I'm going to leave alone because it's just too uncomfortable.
Yeah. No, you're okay. So, no, you're probably very right. But I've shared this with you offline before, but just for the sake of the whole conversation, for the record. For me, I heard this from another pastor a long time ago, and it resonated with me personally that he said, I stay out of knowing what people give so that I don't change the way I disciple them or work with them accordingly. And so and this is very real, like how this would happen, I think, to me. Number one, like, I find out, and okay, it has happened before. I did one time, like, a report was given to me that was supposed to not have numbers on it.
Right.
Because we send out thank you cards to
Right.
all our donors every year. And it wasn't supposed to have numbers on it, but it did. It was accidentally. And
Right.
I became aware of our top donors. Right. This was some years ago.
Yeah.
And then when the pandemic hit and we were getting frustrations and complaints, I did have an awareness in some cases which ones, if they were unhappy, their money would walk.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And that affected me.
Oh, it should.
So in my mind, I've thought it shouldn't. Like, I should respond to them the same way, whether or not they're giving or not. But you're saying, no, that should be factored in.
Yeah, I don't think it's like, okay, this is a good example. So you're engineer Andy, and so you're given a nice chunk of money, and now pandemic comes and you're upset about some decision. I think the thought as a pastor, wow, if they decide to leave the community, that's going to be hard on our community. And I really wish it wasn't going to be that way, man. But that doesn't mean
maybe integrity is knowing that and still making the right decision versus
saying, I'm
not
still
knowing
gonna
that.
love them. And I don't think you should be micromanaging, like, oh, you know, Andy gives $10,000 every year. No, I don't mean it that way. I mean, yeah, I know that Andy gives on a regular basis, and it's, you know, it's substantial, and I know that he's, you know, a doctor. Okay. Like, I have a sense of that. He's giving substantially. I don't need to then sit down with him and talk to him about, like, what does it look like for you to begin to tithe in the community and work through some of that in your life?
Uh-huh.
Because having that knowledge, we talk about something else maybe that's going on in his life.
Yeah,
you know, that's discipleship oriented. I guess for me, it's, if it's family, it's like everybody's at the table. You do bring your labor, and some people have more free space for labor and other people don't. And you bring what you've been given because you want the mission to go forward. Yeah.
And that's one thing that I conclude. I've mentioned this recently to some of our leaders, is in this giving conversation, I actually had us change a little bit of a graphic, or I mentioned it and Mike was very quickly just changed it on his own. But we'd made a little graphic for giving that showed like money involved. And I said, hey, actually the Work and Worship book kind of prompted me to say, I think if we miss the giving that people do, the other giving, and we need to talk more fully orbed about that. And sometimes if somebody's not in the position to give money, but they are in the position to give time and other things, then we should celebrate that the same way and not be like, only money givers are really giving. The rest of you are just volunteers. Like, that's probably not accurate to what the Bible was talking about.
No, it's not. But I mean, I think, Paul's very clear that at the beginning of every week, you should set aside some money.
Yeah.
Whatever you feel that God is inviting you in order to help the community. So it's money, but it wasn't an individualistic culture.
Yeah.
Right? So families are living together. There are patron women and patron men who are running this church these churches financially.
Well, and today we're also very well aware that sometimes the pastor's one of the richest people in the church. And I think our church might think I'm wealthier than I am, like being a business owner.
Right. Do you let everybody know how much money you make?
Not actively. Sometimes people have. One time I had somebody go like, "Wow, interestingly, like we pay such a low salary, but probably have one of the wealthier pastors in town." I was like, "Oh, no, you don't." Like, actually, my wife's salary is significant in like helping things out, but she doesn't. Even if you put us together, you put the two of us together, I know pastors in town that make more than the two of us together.
Right.
Like in small churches.
Sure.
And so then imagine your megachurch pastor. Again, I don't really...
but I think...
it's a weird thing to talk about.
Historically, so Rod and I...
Yeah.
Rod was always clear that the reason that he could be a pastor at the Village and he told the community this. He told them belonging services is because Kathy is committed to working as a nurse, and that supplements their income. Sue and I were always very clear. For the first 10, 15 years, we make $30,000 a year, guys. And do you know what the community did? But when we needed a roof, they got together and bought a roof for us. When we needed our floor tiled, they got together and tiled the floor for us in our house. Like, they understood that they couldn't afford to like give us a larger salary, but they could gather together in special moments. We make that known now.
Our church knows what the church pay. That's posted.
Right.
Like the church pays John, Mike is known.
Communicating this is how much we make helps put the community in, okay, how are we caring for these men and women who are caring for us?
Yep.
And that's important. And if we're all in it together, that means I'm tithing too. So I'm giving that money back.
Which I also do. Yeah.
Right. I mean, so all those things are happening.
Yeah.
But so I just don't think that anything should be what do you call it? Should be something you don't talk about. Like, lack of better words, I meant.
How often do you guys gather the whole church? Like
twice a year.
Just twice a year. Okay. Yeah. Because we're like 2 to 3 times a year. We call it members meeting.
We've gone
which is
from
a
6
lame name,
times a year to 2.
Yeah.
Sometimes 1.
Yeah. And do you talk about more of the like pressing needs and stuff in that space, or
we
pray
do,
over them?
We do a from 8:30 to noon twice a year, and it's kind of like a seminar. So we provide childcare. We talk about the finances. We talk about all the ministries. We'll do some kind of equipping class for the whole church.
Yeah, that's good. We're trying to think this through. Ours are always Sundays after church because it's when we've been most successful at like capturing a big group. But man, it's just a long night, and to even do a short meeting, it's a long night.
That's why we do it on Saturdays.
And like if it's rare on a Saturday, that feels more doable. Might just rip you off on that one. We'll see.
You can rip us off. I mean, I think if you can,
we rip you off all the time, by the way.
If you can if you can get your community to the place where they want to be there, they want to be in everything that's happening.
That's important
because then they financially want to help.
Yeah,
and that's great.
Yeah, I think that's so. To me, like what you're saying right there is really important, and I've struggled with this. I remember this conversation coming up when I interned at a church plant, and people wouldn't be on time and wouldn't come consistently. Mm-hmm. And I remember as a young
20 years in, then we're still struggling with the on time one.
Same. But as an intern, I remember the conversations. It was like, okay, we need to announce that they need to be on time. We're going to flash the lights and make them come in. We're going to, there were all these conversations about what maybe could be done. And I remember thinking and even saying, you know what the issue is they don't want to be there for the beginning of the service because it doesn't feel important. If it, like these same human beings, if you go to a great movie, the movie they've been wanting to see forever, or sporting event, or whatever, maybe not sporting event because people don't value the beginning of it as much, but the great movie where the opening scene is really important, they will be in there because they think it's important.
But can I say that I've been to plenty of movies that are big time movies where people are walking in 5 minutes.
Well, these people are just nuts.
Yeah.
Okay, these people are off the rockers. No.
Yeah, but those are the people.
Yeah, I know.
I mean, I think
it's. I guess I've seen that too, but I would guess the percentage goes up when there is a sense that it's important. So I remember kind of saying maybe we need to make the beginning less like when it's just the pastor gets up and goes, "Hey, welcome everybody." Mm-hmm. That doesn't feel important. But if it were like something started that felt really critical. Anyway, I remember thinking that way. I wonder if there's some parallel to the giving conversation to where when people feel like there's deep impact and importance to this gift, I would assume, and that gets back to the whole like giving to certain things and talking about certain things sometimes, but I would assume people would be more motivated. I would be, if I weren't already like internally committed, if I knew like this is going to really important and impactful stuff. So maybe the communication about how this money is used is a bigger, maybe that's what needs to be done more.
Yeah. I think the thing is, we're all relational. I mean, some of the biggest impact, I think probably where giving shifted, you could trace it back at the Village, was at one of these meetings, which we call drumming circles, where I stood up and said a couple of things. Like I said, hey, I'm struggling financially. I don't know if I can actually do this job anymore because, the giving is not where it needs to be. And, I'm having to think about things differently. And people were like, oh.
Yeah.
And they shifted. And people came up to me and apologized and said, yeah, no, I'm sorry. And we'll take care of it.
Yeah.
And I think that a lot of times, because they know Ashton, my daughter, they were watching her grow up. They knew my wife. They love her. They love me. And they're like, wait, what? We're not taking care of you? Okay. We need to, at least at our best ability in your leadership, take care of you. And so at the Village, we have said, like, okay, we're not actually going to pay a competitive rate at the Village because we want more pastors.
Yeah. Which is one of the things.
But we still want a if you live a disciplined life, a wage you could live at.
Right.
And so that's what we do.
I would love to see all of our folks, I'll include myself, but I especially tend to think about Mike and John and, and our administrator Karen and even our like up and coming interns who we'd love to see invest more. Like I would love for them to be able to get a wage that took care of them well.
Right.
And like, I know I've talked to a couple of them. It's like, they wish they could focus more time on the church.
Yeah.
But because like, I love bivocationalism, but I also am an advocate for, I think I would say like a balanced bivocationalism, and the balance might be a little imbalanced in a couple of their cases to where the other vocation is so necessary that it has to be the priority. And that's a bummer. I think that our church would be in better shape were that not the case.
Yeah, I'm not a great fan of bivocationalism. I think when you see Paul being a bivocationalist, he was a tent maker, which gave him a lot of ability to do what he was doing, and then and to not do it, like not maintain his business.
Well, that's where you get strategic with bivocationalism. This will be a good topic because I've written my little book on it. But,
and I completely am against it. So yeah, it would be really a nice heated debate.
Yeah. But I would say like one of the unique things about my bivocationalism, or kind of trivocationalism in a way, is
you're special. You're a special case.
I am my own unique bird. But the business that I own is one that I founded. Right. And so it's kind of like the tent making, like if I can't make the meeting, I can't. Like, so that's that. I kind of get to decide. And so I don't feel like under the gun from it. I feel like I get to decide how much I invest. And then I have to look at it and go, am I giving enough to make this worthwhile in this business? But I really do get to, for the church and the business, I feel like I can look at the schedule, create it myself, make the one serve the other as needed. My work for the denomination is a little different. This is a new piece where I have to log my hours. I work for somebody else. It's minimal hours. Most of it overlaps really well with what we're doing at the church, which is why I took it. But there are times I kind of go like, oh man, I got to go in and log all the interactions I had with people. This is a massive waste of my time. But I don't get to decide. Mm-hmm. So I think in bivocationalism, you have to really think about your personality type, what you can do, how this actually integrates to your calling and mission.
Sure.
And if it's going to detract or whatever.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of questions to ask.
Well, I think the real big question is, how long do you stay a pastor? And not, because it's more apostolic. So what's the next ministry? What's the next thing you're going to go do? And you turn over to that church. Because I don't honestly think you can fully pastor a community and work another job for long term. You might be able to do it, but you're not going to be able to offer them the fullness. And if you might say, okay, we're going to divide this up, but someone has to be a fully engaged, single-minded person pastoring a community eventually.
Yeah, I think there's stages of church life, and you and I have talked a little bit about, I went to a talk by Alan Hirsch where he had said, and I thought this was very true to my experience, he was using, the Ephesians rubric of apostle, prophet, evangelist, shepherd, teacher, and he was saying the church needs all 5 giftings active in every single one of its members all the time. And I thought, okay, that's probably true. But he said, the way he said this one piece really made sense. He said, what people want, what church organizations want, is they want an apostolic leader, somebody who says, let's take the hill, we can do this, let's build a new church in a new place. And then they want that person to start a church and then transform into a professor-type teacher and therapist-type person. And they cannot do that. They won't. They will try, they will hate their job. You will hate how they do at their job. And so he said that in the American church, we want really great teaching, number one. Shepherding is actually pretty low on our list of what we actually really want, though we need it very much. But we want an apostle to turn into a professor. And his whole thing was, you do need apostolic types to get things started. But then what often happens is the church gets frustrated with that apostolic type, lets them go or they quit, and they go hire their favorite shepherd type or their teacher type. And then they get frustrated with them because they aren't leading them forward into the new frontiers. And they're just not quite as compelling as that previous leader was or whatever, that apostolic type. And his thing was, you should let the apostolic person start it and then make sure that you really bolster the church with your shepherds and teachers and prophets and evangelists, all of them. And then let that apostolic person lead the church into new frontiers while it's being discipled, shepherded, taught well by others. And his suggestion was not all professionals, but that it happened within the church. And that made a lot of sense to me. I sense the need to lead our church into new frontiers. I personally don't know that I'm ever going to become that full-time therapist type and shepherding. And I know that's not therapy, but you know what I'm saying, where the expectation is there's office hours, you're there to meet with me and talk about my stuff. I literally think that role would I would crack within the first year if I had that role. I don't mind teaching as much personally, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think I would agree with most of it. My only pushback is it's all built on still a individualistic mode and an entrepreneurial mode, and I'm not so sure that's what the church is about.
Yeah, no, there's a lot of questions to be asked.
I mean, I feel like the church is either Pauline or Peter. And
explain.
Well, we know all about Paul's churches.
Not everybody.
Right, but he's very entrepreneurial,
yeah.
Right? He's constantly planning churches.
Right.
What churches?
But he didn't stay at them.
No.
Yeah. But he did stay. But he stayed in relationship.
But we've modeled everything like this is the way to do it.
Yeah. Sure.
Not necessarily. Well, how did Peter do it?
Right.
The rock of the church. What was his mode of church planting?
Yeah.
I don't know.
I'm not quite clear on his mode.
But I think
well, I guess in a way.
I mean,
he stayed in Jerusalem.
Sure, I think what Alan is talking about, and it's in it's a church planting movement. It's a city moving movement, right?
Yeah,
so it's churches planted in cities. It's being in the epicenter of everything. To go back to a particular church name. So yeah, I kind of agree with that. I don't know though. I'd have to really ponder.
I don't feel the need for that to be the paradigm.
Yeah.
Just when he was speaking about it,
sense.
I recognized some of
sure.
or maybe to me, I was like, I think our church is at this transition point where people need regular shepherding, maybe more than in the early days because we were a smaller group.
Sure.
And people need some more consistency and things of that nature. And it was like, if I have to morph into that person, I don't think that's going to work.
Right.
And so that's where, but a person like John is much more, he actually thrives, I believe, in the consistency.
Sure. I think one of the things that you see, to go back to Paul, and you see this in Titus and you see it in Timothy as he's instructing church planters and church instructors, overseers.
Yeah, elders, overseers. Yeah.
However, is that the church is really built in a family mode, and it's built as mothers and fathers. Right? And you see that going back and forth in Titus, you see it in Ephesians, and I think there's a desperate need for mothers and fathers.
Yes.
And I think the leaders of all churches, no matter if you have an apostle, teacher, you have to envision yourself as a father or a mother in those leadership spaces, and have to mother and father while you do your gifting, whatever it is, apostle and that kind of thing.
But even we know in families, you look at two families and mother-father doesn't look exactly the same. Because say you've got, let's just go with like, you have an entrepreneur dad.
Sure.
That mom is going to need to be more like that consistent person. Then you find, like, every once in a while, there's that just like nurturer dad who's just like, hey, like, I'm just here to talk all the time. And that mom, like, can actually be more about like, hey, I take care of this garden and I do all this stuff, because dad's inside just like having deep philosophical conversations with the kids. I'm saying you still have to think about
I would agree.
the people in play. I don't want to be individualistic, but
I would agree,
individuals. Yeah.
But I would say that father, like, what is so desperately absent. Like, I'm around pastors enough.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not, I mean, I don't know how many pastors listen who go to the Gospel Coalition, but I would argue that they're not fathering
their churches. Yeah, what would you call it?
I would call it they're professoring their churches.
Well, and that's what Hirsch was saying. He said that generally the mode in our context is churches want professors. They want great talkers who give compelling messages.
The ones who, if we're talking, but again, this goes back to money.
Yeah.
If we're going to fill up a church and have the money, then we want the professor, the teacher.
That's the thing, right?
Right. So I don't know if that's,
when there's, people tend to say when they're looking for a church, great teaching, great worship. And it always,
Christians say this. Yes.
Christians say this. And yes, that's absolutely right. And it always kind of breaks my heart, because I'm like, man, you can have both of those things and not be following Jesus.
Well, and see, here's
discipled at
philosophically, and I've said this on this podcast, I'll say it again. Good teaching and good worship, whatever that looks like, holistic. They're talking about music, but let's just say holistically.
They're usually talking about professional level musicians and on TED Talk level speeches.
If you don't have, but they usually say, but the community is missing. I'm looking how to plug in. And I always say it's because the worship is bad and the teaching is bad. Good teaching, good worship lead to good community. Now, you may
your definition of that is different,
right? Because it's what it creates, not how it's presented, and that's important.
I am.
It could be well presented and create good community, or well presented and not. It tends to be well presented and not,
because it's the emphasis.
Right.
I would agree with you. I am not for poor teaching, bad worship, but it, in my mind, not that we nail this, but I think that when the teaching is really to that particular group, that should lead to good community. When it's generalized, like you're going to an institution that you're not really connect, or like the professor, I don't think it does lead to good. You just come and you get great talks, but they don't lead you into.
Which, by the way, when I sit with people and they talk about their fathers, that's kind of what they experience of their dads.
Like, okay, good talk.
The lectures,
yeah,
right. I mean, some of them experience engaged dads, but from a Gen Xer's position, like, what do we experience from our dads? We experience lectures and
in millennials and down, I tend to hear either like my dad was just like all over the place and I never even knew him. Or on the flip, like my dad was trying to be the best dad in the history of the world.
Right.
Like there for me, never miss a game, never miss a concert. Like,
right, because he's a Gen Xer who never had his dad around.
And is trying to compensate.
Yep.
And that goal can get blocked too. You
Yeah.
try to be everything for your kid and they reject you, and
Right.
or you're too much, and you like, because you're really doing it for yourself. You're trying to be a great dad so you can say you're a great dad and not feel like you failed.
Yeah.
And people can sense when it's about you.
Yeah.
Even especially children.
Well, I have a feeling that people who listen to this podcast are going to be real frustrated. I think this might be one of those where they're pounding the like thing. Eric, say, why are you? I think this could be a good like this might get somebody to email us
faithoverbreakfast@gmail.com.
Yeah, like, here's how it really should be done. Yeah, just tell
somebody knows better than us.
Yes.
If there's anything as pastors, we know.
Yeah.
So somebody knows.
Yeah.
Actually, that's probably also true.
Yeah.
Because we're supposed to be a community.
Yeah.
We're not the gurus, Eric. I mean, you're close.
No, I'm not a guru. I can't guru. You're the guy who's written the books. I have got no books.
Dude, if I were starting a rug company, I would call it U-Rug because it's guru backwards.
That's true. Very good. It's a portmanteau, right? Is that what those are called?
I don't know. You just went out of my realm. So, well, let's land the plane here. You can email us at faithoverbreakfast@gmail.com, express your frustrations, or ask us a question.
Yeah, it's actually very helpful, and we really enjoy when you guys email us questions.
We do.
So, hey, if you got another question for us, send it out to faithoverbreakfast@gmail.com.
We'd love it.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks for tuning in. Anything else? Any other house cleaning stuff you want to tell these people before we sign off?
No, there may be one more podcast after this, and then we're going to launch, at least for 2 months, it'll be the best of the worst.
The best of the worst, or at least for 1 month, because our time's off.
Yeah.
We're going to chat about, you're going to get some stuff cycled back up from the past that were highlights or maybe even lowlights.
We'll be lowest listen, like the episode everyone should have listened to, but nobody did. That's what it is.
More like that.
Yeah,
less of we found our lowest quality conversation. And no, the one that
we're going to go back to when it was really faith over breakfast.
We might.
Yeah, we might pick up one of those.
But also you might get some. We'll chat about what could be that you could get some that are maybe just one-offs, or us with somebody else.
Right.
One of us with somebody else. Anyway, thanks for tuning in, and see you next week.
All right, thank you. You've been listening to Faith Over Breakfast with Pastor Eric Siepen and Pastor Andy Littleton. Please share us on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. Thank you.